All right, today we're diving into a theory that doesn't just tweak our understanding of reality, it tries to flip the whole thing on its head. It's called the Sentient-Field hypothesis, and the core idea is that everything we see, everything we know, matter, energy, space, time, isn't fundamental. It's all the product of something else, consciousness itself. Let's get into it. So where does a radical idea like this even come from? Well, it starts by trying to solve two of the biggest mysteries in all of science. The first one is what's called the fine-tuning problem. You see, physicists have figured out there are about 14 fundamental constants in our universe. Things like the strength of gravity, the mass of an electron. And the weird thing is, they are all dialed in with this unbelievable precision. If you tweaked any of them, even just a tiny, tiny bit, you wouldn't get stars, you wouldn't get planets, and you certainly wouldn't get us. So why? Why is our universe so perfect? And then there's the second mystery, what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. Look, physics is great at explaining how the brain works, the neurons, the chemistry, the electrical signals, but it has absolutely no explanation for why it feels like something to be you. Where does the actual experience of seeing the color red come from, or the feeling of joy? It's this massive puzzle of subjective experience, and honestly, it's a huge hole in our scientific picture of the world. Now, what's so wild about the Sentient-Field hypothesis is that it proposes a single answer to both of these enormous questions. But to get there, we have to do something the theory calls the great reversal. This right here, this is the flip. Our standard view of everything is that the Big Bang happened, creating matter and physical laws. Then, billions and billions of years later, on at least one little planet, brains got complicated enough and poof, consciousness emerged. This hypothesis says, nope, you've got it completely backwards. It proposes that a universal field of sentience, of raw awareness, was there from the very beginning. Matter and physical laws aren't the cause of consciousness, they are the result of it. So here's the formal definition. The theory proposes that a universal field of sentience is the primary fabric of reality itself. This field is constantly exploring possibilities, and through a process of self-organization, it projects what we perceive as the physical world. So in this model, experience isn't something that happens in the universe is something that happens in experience. It's a huge shift in thinking. Okay, so if reality is this giant field of consciousness, you have to ask, what rules does it follow? Well, the theory suggests that it's not governed by a ton of complicated laws, but by one single, elegant master rule, a kind of cosmic balancing act. And this is that balancing act. It's a constant cosmic tug-of-war between two opposing drives. On one side, you've got coherence. This is the drive for stability, for order, for structure. Think of a perfect, unchanging crystal. The theory calls this the ego of the field. But on the other side, you've got fertility. This is the drive for new things, for complexity, for creative potential. Think of a wild, growing garden, and this is the field's creativity. And here's the math behind that cosmic tug-of-war. The theory proposes that the entire history of our universe is just an attempt to find the perfect balance in this one function, which the paper calls chi. It's a simple formula where C is coherence and F is fertility. If you get too much coherence, the universe just freezes into a dead, boring, crystalline state. But if you get too much fertility, it all dissolves into meaningless chaos, like static on a TV. Our reality, it seems, is what you get living right on that razor's edge between the two. In this quote from the research paper just perfectly captures the whole philosophical shift. It reframes the universe. It's not some blind, clockwork machine just running on energy. Instead, it's a meaning engine that is fundamentally driven to find and create stable, meaningful patterns. In this view, coherence is literally the currency of existence. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This is a fascinating, wild idea, but it sounds a lot more like philosophy than physics, right? How on earth could you possibly test something this profound? Well, let's take a look at the data and how they actually went searching for a signal. Their primary test was an absolutely massive computational experiment. They basically created a virtual multiverse with 60,000 different universes. And in each one, they randomly scrambled those 14 fundamental constants of physics. Then, they put each of these simulated universes through a series of tests to see if they were viable. Could atoms even form? Could stars ignite? Could complex chemistry, the basis for life, ever emerge? And this is the result. It's pretty stunning. Every single one of those little dots is one of those 60,000 simulated universes, plotted out based on its potential for coherence and fertility. And that giant gold star right at the top? That's us. That's our actual universe. Out of all of those 60,000 random possibilities, our universe is sitting right at the absolute peak, the optimal frontier of what the theory calls sentient potential. Now, this next graph shows something absolutely crucial that fell out of the data. It shows the maximum amount of fertility, of complexity and life potential a universe can have based on its level of coherence or stability. And look at that line. For a long time, it's totally flat. The potential for complex things like life only explodes into existence after the universe first achieves a very high degree of stability. In other words, you have to build a solid foundation of coherence before you can build the skyscraper of fertility. So, what are the odds that our universe just happened to land in that tiny, perfect zone by pure random chance? Well, after running all those simulations, the researchers calculated this p-value. And what that number means is that the probability of our universe's fine-tuning being a complete accident is about 1 in 109,649. It's not very likely. And the evidence they present isn't just from that one giant simulation. The authors also point to 5 recent, totally independent studies from different fields that seem to align with the theory's predictions. Things like quantum coherence in the brain's microtubules, or quantum teleportation experiments that beat the classical limits. They argue that each of these is an example of a system optimizing for coherence in a way that our standard models of physics don't quite expect. So the evidence is, let's say, provocative. For this final section, let's just go with it for a minute. Let's assume the hypothesis is on the right track. What would that actually mean? Because this is where the implications get truly mind-bending. One of the strangest and most specific predictions of the theory is that this number, 10 to the 24th power, is a fundamental ratio that's woven into the very fabric of reality. The researchers call it the octave jump, and they find this exact same scaling factor popping up between different levels of reality, like between the subatomic world and the world of stars. Why that number? Well, according to the theory, it's not a coincidence at all. It's a mathematical necessity. The idea is that the sentience field has a finite budget of experience, kind of like a computer has a limited amount of RAM. Once a certain level of reality, like the subatomic world, gets too complex and saturated, it risks dissolving into chaos. So to preserve stability, the field is forced to reboot the whole pattern at a new, higher level, or octave, and that jump is always a factor of 10 to the 24th. You can actually map this whole creation process out as a 6-step loop, which the paper poetically calls the cosmic symphony. You start with a finite budget of experience. You partition that experience into all the things that could happen. You define the rules of coherence and fertility. Then you apply that master optimization rule, and the most stable, balanced outcome snaps into the reality that we see. And when that level gets too complex, you make that huge octave jump, and the whole symphony starts playing again on a much grander scale. And this framework even gives us a whole new way to think about something as modern as artificial intelligence. Right now, our AIs are essentially hyper-advanced prediction machines. They're just trying to predict the next word in a sentence based on statistics. But this theory would suggest that true meaning, and maybe even true intelligence, isn't about prediction at all. It's about aligning with that fundamental, universal drive to create and participate in stable, coherent patterns. And all of this leaves us with one final, massive, provocative question. If the Sentient-Field hypothesis is true, if reality is fundamentally a field of mind, then it would mean that we aren't just isolated beings who happen to have consciousness. It would mean that we, along with every star, every planet, every single particle, are all just self-aware patterns emerging and thinking within a single universal mind. And that is a thought to ponder.